Chapter 1. Ashes and Snow. The cold penetrated to the bones. It didn't just bite, it gnawed. The wind howled, as if the devil himself had licked the cliffs of Isdal and was now trying to swallow them. The smell of burning hung in the air, sharp, sweet, tinged with something human. Policeman Erland leaned over the body. His fingers trembled, not from the cold. She lay before him. A woman. Or what was left of her. Her skin was black as coal. Her arms were twisted. Her legs were partially charred, and beneath them lay melted plastic. Only the metal frame remained of the cosmetic bag found nearby. The scent of perfume was still lingering, tart, floral, nauseatingly alive. The woman had burned to ashes, but her scent endured. Erland turned away and cursed. He didn't care that the captain was nearby. He'd drunk too much coffee to hold back now. "What do you think?" the captain asked, lighting a cigarette. The lighter flame flickered in the wind. Erland gulped, as if it would help. "I think someone wanted us to believe she fried herself. And you don't believe it. Someone benefits from me believing it." The captain chuckled. "Welcome to Isdal. Even the snow smells of lies here." Silence reigned all around. Only the wind and the crackling of charred fabric. They found footprints under a tree. 3, heavy, male ones. Then, a cliff. As if the men had vanished. Maybe someone helped her escape. Erland muttered. The captain chuckled. If they helped, it's definitely not heaven. While the experts fussed, one of them picked up a tiny object from the snow, a charred hairpin. On it, a tiny piece of blonde hair. Perfectly unnatural. A wig. Erland felt something inside him click. Not fear, no. Curiosity. That always came first. And then, the nightmares. He looked at the mountain, where the snow mingled with ash. Up there, the world was pure. Down here, beneath our feet, filth, lies, and human charcoal. Do you think death is the end? You're sorely mistaken. Sometimes death is simply a way to disappear. Sometimes it's the final act of a desperate game. And today we'll tell the story of a woman who vanished. Without leaving a name. Only ashes, the scent of perfume, and fear. A story Norway tried to forget. And to understand the world. The story of the Isdal Woman. Chapter 2. A faceless woman. The morgue smelled of bleach and despair. It was a place that could kill your appetite, your hope, and your faith in humanity, all in a single morning. Erland stood by the table where she lay. Or rather, what remained of her after the fire. Her charred skin stretched taut like an old parchment letter. Her eyes burned. Her teeth remained, but they were no help either. No fillings, no marks. Passports. 0. Jewelry. 0. Name. 0. A woman without a face. Without a past. Without a country. The examiner, an elderly man with a perpetually hungover expression, looked at Erland over his glasses. She died about 20 hours before she was found. The fire was intense, but uneven in places. As if they hadn't simply set her on fire, but tried to make her burn. Sounds romantic, Erland chuckled darkly. Only if you're a pyromaniac, the expert muttered and wrote something down in his notebook. The objects found nearby lay on the table. 2 plastic bottles, one empty of gasoline. An empty box of pills, sedatives. A piece of cloth, partially melted. And a scrap of paper, with letters no one could decipher. Maybe suicide, the captain suggested. Erland shrugged. If a suicide washes all the tags off his clothes, burns off his fingerprints, and sets himself on fire with gasoline in the wilderness, we have very disciplined suicides. The captain chuckled. Maybe a spy. Maybe you should finally buy some gloves, and I'll stop watching you handle evidence. The newspapers found out first. A day later, the headlines screamed. Mystery woman found in mountain valley. Fire and mystery in Isdal. And, of course, police investigate case of espionage. The editors of Bergen waged a small war. One magazine suggested calling her the Snow Lady, another the Spy's Cookie, because there were crumbs left. Erland, reading this, laughed for the first time in a week. The laugh was nervous, dry, but lively. Let them laugh, he told the captain. Laughter is the last hope of not going mad. Or the first sign that you've already gone mad. While the journalists were writing sensational stories, the lab was churning out facts. On the body were traces of a synthetic fiber, typical of women's clothing from southern Europe. The stomach contained the remains of food typical of continental cuisine. On the shoes were particles of clay, which is not found in Norway. She had arrived recently. And clearly had no intention of staying. Erland looked at the body and tried to imagine what she had looked like in life. What had her voice been like? What had been her last words? Perhaps she had spoken French. Or German. Or Russian. He didn't know. No one knew. Only the snow outside the window knew the truth, but it remained silent. Snow was the perfect witness, it saw everything but said nothing. The captain sank wearily into his chair. Well, Erland. A lady without a name, without a face, without a country. What do you say? I'll say that someone really didn't want us to know who she was. So what now? Erland took a cigarette from his pocket and lit it. Now we're looking for where the ashes came from. He exhaled smoke and added quietly, because if the ashes know more than the living, we're screwed. Meanwhile. At the Bergen station, 2 workers found a forgotten suitcase. Old, tattered, smelling of the same perfume. Inside were cosmetics, wigs, and passports in different names. But they didn't yet know that they hadn't opened luggage. But a portal to a spy game where every move cost lives. And that was only the beginning. Chapter 3. A trail in a suitcase. Bergen is not popular in winter. It's cold, wet, and you always feel like someone is watching you. Maybe it's just seagulls. Or maybe it's your conscience. The train station smelled of coffee, cheap buns, and melancholy. 2 station workers were sorting through forgotten belongings when they found it, an old, worn, dark leather suitcase. On the handle, a barely visible tag, Bergen, Oslo. No names. No addresses. Only silence and the strange smell of perfume. One of the workers, Lars, pried the suitcase open with a knife. Click. The lock gave way. The lid opened, and the air around it filled with a scent. Too exquisite for ordinary luggage. Too lively for its dead owner. Inside were neatly folded items. Dresses, scarves, cosmetics, several wigs, and passports. 8 of them. All under different names. All of different nationalities. All with the same smile in the photo. The faceless woman suddenly regained her faces. 8 at once. Is this a collection? Erland asked, examining the contents. Or maybe she just has identity issues, the captain chuckled. Then she needed a psychiatrist, not gasoline. They were standing in the police evidence room. On the table was a suitcase, beneath it a puddle of water from melted snow. It all looked like an exhibit at the How Not to Lead a Double Life exhibition. In one of the hidden pockets, they found a small notebook. A gray cover, covered in numbers and letters. Not addresses. Not phone numbers. Codes. What is this? Erland asked. Maybe accounting, the captain suggested. Then where are the taxes? The police called in an analyst, a young, overly smart guy named Joachim. He looked at the book, squinted, and said, "This isn't accounting. These are itineraries." "How do you know?" "Because I did the same when I skipped class." Joachim laid out the pages, comparing dates and letters. Each combination is a date and place. Here, look. OS is Oslo. B is Bergen. T is Trondheim. Erland nodded. And these numbers? The length of her stay. She moved almost every day. It turned out the woman had been staying in hotels under assumed names. A different accent, a different hair color, in each hotel. In some places, she posed as an antique dealer. In others, as a sales agent. At one point, she even said she was writing a book about Norwegian nature. Well, she certainly studied nature, Erland said grimly. Under particularly extreme conditions. When the case reached the higher-ups, everyone immediately remembered the Cold War. It was 1970, the perfect time to die in silence and remain a secret. Norway is a neutral country, but its geography is treacherous. Too close to the Soviet Union, too convenient for NATO. And too curious about foreign missiles. Especially those called penguins. Small, but powerful. They were tested nearby, and judging by the records, the woman had been to those parts. Coincidence? Perhaps. But, as Erland said, coincidences are when someone really tries to make you think so. Joachim brought back a printout of the routes. All the dots connected into a strange triangle: Bergen, Stavanger, Trondheim. On the map, it looked like a surveillance network. The captain scratched his head. So maybe she just loved to travel. Erland snorted. With 8 passports and an encrypted notebook. Well, maybe she has a hobby. Yes. Spying on NATO. Meanwhile, the newspapers were already celebrating. They wrote. Isdalen's mystery: was the nameless woman a spy? Missiles, codes, and death, a new spy novel in Norway. And Erland read these articles and thought. If she really was a spy, who was she spying on? And who was spying on her? Late that night, he opened the suitcase again. The smell of perfume hit him in the head. Something floral, with a hint of bitterness. Like lavender weeping. He pulled out the wig. The hair was light, almost white. He placed it against the photograph, and felt as if it were looking at him. "What were you trying to say?" he whispered. Silence. Only the ticking of the clock. And then he noticed something crunching under the lining of the suitcase. He carefully cut the fabric with a knife. A piece of film fell out. Photographic film. He held it up to the light, and his heart sank. On the film, the silhouette of a woman at a military installation. In the background, a missile-marked penguin. Erland realized. This wasn't just a death case. This was an entry ticket into a spy game where the losers burned to ashes. He didn't know what he'd gotten himself into. And the worst was yet to come. Chapter 4. The Market Hotel and the Woman in the Mirror. The Market Hotel in Bergen looked like it was tired of being a hotel. The facade was peeling, the sign was flickering, and the receptionist dreamed of his pension more than his salary. But it was there, a week before her death, that she rented a room. The name in the magazine was Fenella Larsen. On her face was a smile that promised nothing. On her head was a copper-colored wig. On her lips was lipstick the color of blood. "Yes, I remember her," said the receptionist, an elderly man with a mustache and the character of an old cat. She smiled, but it was as if she were smiling through you. "You know someone like that?" "I know," replied Erland. "I had an ex-girlfriend like that." The room smelled of perfume and loneliness. On the nightstand were the remains of lipstick, a couple of wig hairs, and a ticket from Oslo. In the trash can was a French chocolate wrapper. Not cheap. A woman without a name, but with taste. On the wall was a mirror. It was slightly fogged, as if someone had recently breathed on it. Erland ran his finger across the glass, leaving a mark. In the reflection, only he. But for some reason, it seemed as if someone was looking back. Witnesses recalled her differently. A waitress from the restaurant said. She ate slowly, as if counting the bites. She drank white wine. Alone. Taxi driver. She spoke German, but with an accent. Maybe Belgian. Store clerk. She bought cream and a mirror. She said, "Sometimes you need to see who you are, even if you don't want to." Everyone remembered something different, as if they were seeing not a person, but a reflection. Assemble all these fragments, and you still won't get a face. Joachim, the cipher clerk, looked through her itinerary. Each hotel, a new person. In Oslo, the Elizabeth Linen. In Trondheim, the Vera Steiner. In Stavanger, the Alexandra Plaza. He chuckled. She lived like a touring theater. Erland replied. Just without the final applause. At one of the hotels, they found a curious detail. In the guest form, under Purpose of Trip, she wrote, Business and Nature. The captain chuckled. An excellent combination. Espionage and botany. Well, missiles are also part of nature, if you consider them its worst experiment, Erland snapped. Meanwhile, the investigation began to resemble a farce. Every new witness brought a new theory. One maid claimed to have seen her with a man in a gray suit. Another, that she cried constantly. A third, that she had no shadow. This third later admitted to drinking 3 glasses of cognac, but that didn't improve the situation. That evening, returning to his room, Erland turned on the table lamp. In front of him were photographs, notes, maps. She was in each photograph, but different. Brunette, brown-haired, blonde. French, German, Italian. And each time, the same gaze. Cold, attentive. As if she were studying everyone but herself. He looked at one of the photographs longer than usual. A woman stood by the window, a man's silhouette reflected in the mirror. His face, indecipherable. "Who are you?" Erland whispered. And the silence answered, "Are you sure you want to know?" The next day, they found new evidence. At the bottom of the suitcase was a small business card with the logo of a hotel in Stavanger. On the back, handwritten. 72/OS/Penguin. Joachim froze. Penguin is a rocket. I know, said Erland. And if she wrote that, it clearly wasn't out of a love of ornithology. Late that night, he stood by the mirror in her room again. Looking at himself, he suddenly realized he couldn't see the difference between himself and her. He, too, hid behind faces. He, too, worked in the shadows. He, too, lied, only to himself. Outside, the wind pounded the glass. Snow fell softly, as if covering the city with a blanket of oblivion. Erland exhaled and said, "A woman without a name, and now I, too, am sleepless." He turned off the light. Something moved in the mirror. Maybe just a reflection. Or maybe a memory. Meanwhile, at the Norwegian Defense Headquarters, someone was opening a folder marked "Secret." On the first page was a photograph of a woman from Isdal. Caption, Observer. Undisclosed. Possible leak. And so the hunt began. Chapter 5. Cold War and Hot Rumors. The winter of 1970 in Norway was such that even memories froze. The sea was lead gray, and the sky seemed as if someone had forgotten to turn on color. At that time, spies didn't wear tuxedos or order martinis. They hid in hotels, spoke briefly, and died, quietly, without fanfare. When information about the Isdal Woman leaked out, the country went into a frenzy. Newspapers, politicians, the military, everyone was looking for someone to blame. The enemy, naturally, was somewhere out there, over the horizon. Although, if you think about it, the Cold War was convenient precisely because the enemy was always far enough away that you didn't have to look in the mirror. Joachim brought a new map. On it, all the cities where the woman had been seen were marked with red pins. It was a strange sight, lines stretched along the coast, connecting bases where new missiles were being tested. It's a coincidence, the captain said, without much conviction. Of course, Erland replied. Just like the fact that I'm still getting paid. At a military meeting, where the report was accidentally leaked, one general said. Spies. On our soil. Nonsense. Nonsense, the journalist asked. Then explain why she lived under 8 names. The general smiled. Maybe she just couldn't decide who to be. Like the rest of Europe. Rumors spread through Bergen. Some said she'd been seen with a NATO officer. Some said she was a defector from the East. And the most romantic claimed she was the mistress of a Russian agent, who'd abandoned him for the sea. The sea, by the way, declined to comment. Meanwhile, Erland sat in the bar, which smelled of beer and defeat. He leafed through photographs, missiles, maps, wigs, faces. Each picture a new lie. She didn't run away, he muttered. She was completing a mission. The bartender raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Because I can see she's not hiding. She's acting. She just doesn't know who she's acting against. The bartender shrugged. We all live like that, only without the wigs. The next morning, a new headline appeared in Bergen. Woman spy and the penguin tests. Has the truth come to light? The truth, as it turned out, preferred to sit in the shadows. The Ministry of Defense immediately declared. It was an accident. Suicide. The woman is probably mentally unstable. Erland closed the newspaper, laughed, and said, yes, of course. Crazy. 8 passports, codes, military training grounds. Crazy people these days are very organized. Joachim twirled his pencil thoughtfully. You know, if this is all true, then we have a whole network of agents operating in our country. And if it's not true, asked Erland. Then we're just living a very boring life. He sighed. Sometimes it doesn't matter who she is. What matters is that she reminded everyone, war never ends, it just changes temperature. The captain, learning that the case might be closed, said, it was decided from above. The incident is closed, they said. Of course, Erland replied. Better to bury a secret than to dig up the truth. What if something inconvenient comes out of nowhere? You still think she's a spy? Erland stubbed out his cigarette. I think this is a man who was used and then burned. Pause. Literally. That evening, he stood by the window of his office. The snow fell slowly, as if time was tired. He said aloud, not for anyone, just into the air. People fight for flags, die for secrets, and then their stories are locked away. And all this for the sake of peace, which no one can dream of peacefully anyway. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, a man in a gray suit entered a phone booth. He dialed a number. He said briefly. The target has been eliminated. All traces have been erased. Pause. Yes, the woman from Isdal. No, they didn't recognize her. The click of the receiver. He stepped out into the cold, inhaled the frosty air, and said to himself. One less. The world won't be any warmer for that. But he didn't know he was already being followed. And something far more terrifying than the truth awaited him. Chapter 6. Voices from the Dark. Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't preserve the truth, it preserves convenient versions. Witnesses lie not because they want to, but because that's how the brain works. It turns horror into a fairy tale to keep from going crazy. And Erland had the feeling that all of Bergen had collectively gone crazy. The interrogations followed one after another. The room smelled of tobacco, paper, and coffee, the cocktail of any investigation. A photograph of the woman from Isdal hung on the wall. Half the witnesses looked at her as if she were a ghost. The others, as if she were a movie star. The taxi driver arrived first. A man with a face like he'd been cut out of an old overcoat. Yes, I gave her a ride, he said. She had an accent. What kind? German. Or French. Maybe Italian. Or maybe Martian. Erland couldn't resist. The taxi driver took offense. Listen, I'm just a driver, not a linguist. Next came a waitress from the hotel restaurant. Slim, nervous, gesturing as if swatting invisible flies. She was wearing a black coat, she said. She was smoking Blue Mountain. Only French women smoke those. Maybe a tourist. Tourists don't check the door every 3 minutes. How did you remember that? Because I was counting. Then came a flurry of theories. One woman claimed to have seen her in church, praying, but crossing herself incorrectly, the Catholic way. Another said she bought a ticket to Oslo but didn't board the train. A third insisted the woman had left a note in French at the cafe. Everyone translated it differently. I'm leaving forever. I'm watching. I'm tired. Joachim said. That's not French, it's code. Erland sighed. Excellent. Now we have not just a dead woman but a poetic one. One witness, an old artist who lived near Isdal, claimed to have seen a light in the mountains. 2 silhouettes. One tall, the other a woman. Then a flash. A flashlight, perhaps. No. It was like an explosion. But a quiet one. Erland clenched his teeth. An explosion, but a quiet one. I like specifics. The testimony tangled like wires. One said she was limping. Another said she was walking quickly. A third said she was laughing. A fourth said she was crying. The fifth said, she looked at me as if she knew I would die before her. And, by the way, he died a month later. The captain, looking at the records, said, "So, what do you think of our choir of madmen?" As usual. Everyone remembers their own movie. Only everyone has a different soundtrack. That evening, when the interrogations were over, Erland was left alone in the office. He listened to the tape recordings of the witnesses. The voices whispered, argued, lied. He closed his eyes. And suddenly one voice stood out from the general din. A woman. Quiet, hoarse. Speaking in German. They already know. Tell him it's too late. Erland jumped up. Who is that? Joachim came running from the next room. What happened? Who put the German recording in here? Nobody. This is from the taxi driver's interrogation tape. Maybe it was overwritten. Or someone recorded over it. Silence fell. Cold, thick. Erland whispered. Tell him it's too late. To whom? Joachim looked at him, pale. Maybe you. Meanwhile. In the evidence warehouse, someone was fiddling with a woman's suitcase. The young intern assigned to count the evidence suddenly heard a soft click inside. He opened the suitcase and saw a small metal cylinder under the lining. Inside was a tiny reel of magnetic tape. With a signature in German, Bericht. Letzt. Report. Final. He didn't tell anyone. He simply took the reel home. Out of curiosity. Because curiosity is the first step to ruin, especially in a cold country. Erland didn't sleep that night. Voices swirled in his head. Lies and truth intertwined like two wires about to short-circuit. He understood. This woman could be anyone, a spy, a fugitive, a double agent, a phantom of war. But one thing was certain. She lived in fear. And those who live in fear always know too much. The next morning, the intern was found dead. A heart attack, the doctor said. At the age of 23. On his desk was a tape recorder and a reel. The tape had completely melted. And only one piece remained intact. On it, a female voice, whispering in Russian. I'm gone. And soon you won't be either. Erland dropped his cup. The coffee spilled like blood on snow. He realized. This wasn't just a story about a woman. It was a message from the darkness. And someone was still listening. Chapter 7. The Secret of Codes. When the woman's notebook was brought into the room, Erland said. Here it is. The Little Bible of Chaos. The book looked innocent, a brown cover, neat letters, as if written by an arithmetic teacher. But as soon as you opened it, it became clear, the arithmetic here was from another universe. On the pages were lines like O22P, C305, S13N. The captain twisted the notebook, as if trying to squeeze meaning out of it. Maybe this is a train schedule. Aha, Erland snorted. Trains to nowhere. Joachim, who loved puzzles, hovered over the notes like a cat over a laser point. It's a code. And a structured one at that. Not amateurish. Translate. You can't just translate. You need to understand the logic. Exactly. And spies' logic is like poets. The less you understand, the smarter you seem. They brought materials from the hotels. Every time the woman checked in, she used a new name, a new passport, and a new handwriting. But she always left the same entry on the form. Purpose of travel, business. What kind of business requires 8 passports and 2 wigs? Good question. Joachim spent several days working on the code. His coffee was gone, and so were his nerves. The board was a web of arrows, numbers, and words. On one of the sheets, he circled and read. B. Bergen. S. Stavanger. O. Oslo. Do you understand? He said, gesturing excitedly. Not quite. These aren't just letters. They're route codes. She was tracking something moving. Who? Nobody. For what? Erland said slowly. 4 missiles. At that time, Norway was testing a new type of missile, the Penguin. Small, controllable, with a head that saw the target. Symbolic. A woman who saw everything, and a missile that saw the target. And both could fly too far. Joachim opened the map. Connected the dots of her movements with a line. The result was a strange pattern, like a network. Each hotel was located near a military facility or testing ground. Coincidence? Asked the captain. Coincidences are just lazy versions of fate, replied Erland. They found another trace. In the margins of the notebook, tiny spots of purple ink, almost invisible. The numbers appeared under the ultraviolet light. V2, D17, P1. Joachim whispered, those are the test site designations. How do you know? My brother serves there. Or served there. The captain tapped the table nervously. Stop. If she knew those codes, she had access to classified information. And if she had access, then someone gave it to her. Erland looked up, then it was one of ours. That evening, he returned home and stared at the city lights for a long time. Each window was like a separate code. Each person was like a message someone had encrypted. He thought, maybe our whole life is just a cipher, only someone else has the key. Meanwhile, in the Ministry of Defense building, 3 men in gray suits discussed a new order. All materials on the Isdal case are to be classified. Why? Because they found something they shouldn't have. One of them added. And one more thing. Transfer investigator Erland Halver. Farther away. That same evening, Erland received an envelope without a return address. Inside was a scrap of paper with neat handwriting. Don't look any further. The answers burned with me. And a signature. 3 letters, E-L-V. Joachim asked. Are those initials? Or coordinates? Where to? Erland grinned. To hell, probably. Where all the secrets are kept. But he didn't know that the envelope hadn't been left by a courier. But by a man in black gloves, who later stood for a long time under the window and watched the investigator read the message. He smiled. And said quietly, like a prayer. It's too late, Erland. She's not alone. And all this was just the beginning. Because now they had found more than just a code. They had found the reason why she had to be killed. Chapter 8. A trail in the ashes. Ash is an honest substance. It doesn't lie. It doesn't hide what came before. It simply whispers, it's over. But only fools think ashes are the end. Sometimes they're the beginning. Bergen didn't sleep that night. The wind moaned between the rooftops, and the street smelled of snow and burning. Somewhere far away, on the outskirts, the old police archives building was burning. Everything burned, protocols, photographs, evidence, reports. And with them, the truth. The captain ran into the office, shouting. Who was on duty? Who was on duty? The duty officer spread his hands. The fire started itself. A short circuit. It started itself. Of course. And then it put itself out and reported it to the authorities itself. Erland arrived in the morning. All that remained was a pile of gray ash and the charred smell of mystery. He bent down and picked up a piece of metal, a melted button, maybe from a uniform, maybe from someone's jacket. A coincidence, Joachim said, standing nearby. If we had a price for every coincidence, we'd have bought ourselves a new Norway long ago. The expert said, the fire started from the inside, from the wiring. Except the wiring was dead. And the locks were picked. Erland nodded. So someone came in first and then pretended it was an accident. One of our own, Joachim added. We don't have any others. That same day, one of the archive's employees, Karsten, went missing. Young, quiet, harmless. The same one who once worked with evidence. His apartment was found empty. On the table was an ashtray with Blue Mountain cigarettes. Erland said quietly, it's ironic. Even cigarettes come back, but people don't. That evening, in his office, he pulled that same scrap of paper from his pocket, the answers burned with me. He looked at it as if it were a mirror image of fate. You know, Joachim, he said, I think that woman knew everything would burn. Why? Because secrets are like oil. Someone always wants to set them on fire. Joachim found one strange document in the archives, miraculously preserved. A report marked, Germany, FRG, contacts via Switzerland. It mentioned a woman, codenamed Fenrir, after the wolf from Norse mythology. Fenrir, Erland said. The one who is supposed to swallow the sun. Beautiful. Symbolic. So she was supposed to swallow the light. Or at least extinguish it. That night, he returned to the scene of the fire. The cold was so cold his bones rattled. He crouched down by the charred folders and ran his hand through the ashes. Something hard under his fingers. He pulled it out, a charred film. Barely visible on it were the words engraved on a metal sleeve. Project EDDA. Erland whispered. EDDA, like the ancient sagas. Joachim replied. Or like a code name. Meanwhile, in the basement of a ministry building sat a man in a gray suit. The same one who had once called from a phone booth. He spoke into the phone. The archive has been destroyed. The investigator is still digging. Pause. Yes, we'll warn you. If necessary, repeat the Isdal incident. He hung up, lit a cigarette, and grinned. The Cold War. It never ended. We just call it security now. The next day, Erland called Joachim. I don't think we found a woman. We found a system. A system. Yes. And it kills when someone tries to understand how it works. Joachim frowned. Maybe we should just drop all this. Of course. As soon as our conscience is filed away. By evening, the sky was filled with smoke from another fire, in a warehouse full of old materials. The wind carried the smell of burning to the headquarters. Erland looked out the window and said. Look, Joachim, they're not burning evidence. They're burning memories. Why? Because memories are more dangerous than weapons. He walked to the mirror and looked at himself, a tired face, eyes full of sleepless nights. And he whispered. When the truth burns, only smoke remains in its place. And smoke, it lives longer than people. But at that moment, he didn't yet know. That from the ashes sometimes rises something greater than a ghost. And in Isdal, where the snow still held charred footprints, someone was walking slowly. Leaving new ones. And the worst was yet to come. Chapter 9. Shadows over the fjord. The fjord was dark, like a mirror of conscience. A cold wind blew in from the sea, tearing the clouds to shreds. The snow no longer fell, it simply hung in the air, as if it had decided not to touch the ground. Erland stood on the pier, lighting another cigarette. The smoke mingled with sea salt, the taste of truth, if anyone ever dared to taste it. He felt himself being watched. Not possibly, not seemed, but he felt it. In his back, in his breath, in the trembling of his fingers. Paranoia? Perhaps. But in Norway in the 70s, paranoia wasn't a diagnosis, but a way to survive. That evening, he met Joachim in an old cafe on the waterfront. The place smelled of fish, coffee, and fatigue. They sat in the corner, so as not to be seen and so as not to be seen. Someone erased all the data on the EDDA project, Joachim said, lowering his voice. Even on the military servers. And the servers aren't burning. They're not burning, but they're disappearing. Like witnesses. Erland chuckled. You know, I don't think you and I are investigators anymore. We're just two idiots arguing with history. Joachim sipped his coffee and quietly replied. History doesn't argue. It just rewrites itself. As they left the cafe, the headlights of a car blinded them for a moment. The car drove by slowly. The driver was nowhere in sight. Joachim turned around. Did I imagine it? No. Fear usually has a great memory. The next day, Erland was supposed to appear for questioning, now it was his superiors who were calling him. With the wording, exceeding official authority. Unwarranted interference in military affairs. He chuckled. Excellent. So you hit the nail on the head. Meanwhile, Joachim received a strange letter. No stamp, no return address. Inside was only a photograph. Black and white. A woman from Isdal. Alive. Standing by a car with a diplomatic license plate. On the back was a date, 2 months before her death. He called Erland. It's impossible. Joachim, my friend, everything here is impossible. And yet it happens. That evening, they met at the old lighthouse. The place was quiet, save for the cries of seagulls and the whispering sound of the wind. So, she worked for one of ours? Joachim asked. Or for all of them at once? People like that change employers faster than wigs. Joachim looked at the fjord. What if she was a double agent? Then someone killed her to be the only one left. Pause. What if she's alive? Joachim said quietly. Erland didn't answer. He simply looked into the black water. And thought that if she really was alive, others would soon die. That night, civilians burst into the headquarters. Without identification, without explanation. They turned everything upside down. They took documents, tapes, even Erland's personal notes. What does this mean? He asked the captain. The captain just shrugged. Orders from above. From above. Well, the sky's the limit. A day later, Joachim was found dead. On the shore of the fjord. Officially, drowning. But the body was shoeless, and the pockets were turned inside out. And the strangest thing was, there was a pencil mark left on his palm. A word, hastily written. EDDA-17. Erland looked at the photo and remained silent. The captain said. My condolences. He was a good guy. He was a living guy. That's rare. That evening, Erland sat by the window and poured himself a shot of vodka. The cold alcohol burned his throat, like a truth he'd realized too late. He whispered. Joachim didn't drown. They drowned him to settle the matter. He picked up the map and found a spot marked EDDA-17, a small island off the coast. He closed his eyes. And he realized, that's where he'd have to go. Meanwhile, in one of the Ministry of Defense basements, the same man in gray was talking on the phone. One has been eliminated. The other will soon finish himself off. Pause. Yes. He's already hooked. The fjord will do its thing. He hung up and looked out the window. At the sea. At the icy surface, reflecting the dead stars. He grinned. You know, dear woman from Isdal, you're still working. Even dead. Erland gathered his things. The map, the notebook, the revolver. He put on his coat, looked at his reflection, and said. Well, let's go look for the ghost. He stepped out into the night. The wind lashed at his face, and the fjord waited. And somewhere out there, among the rocks and snow, a shadow was already waiting for him. A shadow with a woman's voice. Chapter 10. Edda's Island. The fjord was motionless. Too motionless, as if the water knew what was about to happen and had decided not to interfere. Erland stood at the pier, breathing in the air that smelled of salt, iron, and inevitability. The small motorboat rocked near the shore, as if unsure whether to participate in this suicide. Well, he said aloud, let's go see what they're hiding there under the word secret. The journey to the island took a little over an hour. The wind lashed at his face with icy fingers, and it felt as if every minute was slicing away a piece of warmth. The gray sky merged with the sea, there was no boundary, only infinity. A deadly, beautiful infinity. When the island appeared in the distance, Erland felt it wasn't just a place. It was like a wound left on the body of a country. The shore greeted him with deathly silence. No birds, no tracks, only snow and the ruins of old military buildings. He walked slowly, carefully, listening to every sound. The ice crunched under his feet like a bony echo. Amid the rubble, he saw a metal sign, half buried in the snow. EDDA, Forskningsavdeling. Research Department. Research, he chuckled. Of course. That's what all monsters call their kitchens. It was dark and cold inside the concrete hangar. The walls were covered in peeling paint, the floor a patch of rust mixed with ash. He turned on the flashlight. The beam slid down the wall, illuminating rows of cabinets labeled V2D17 P1. The very same designations from the notebook. A box lay on the floor. He opened it. Inside were charred film strips, folders, and one surviving photographic print. A woman. The same one. She looked straight into the lens, her eyes icy calm. On the back was a signature. EDDA-17. Accept full fort. EDDA-17. Confirmation complete. So it was an operation, he whispered. But what exactly were you confirming? In response, something clicked somewhere below. He froze. Then he heard footsteps. Slow. Precise. Erland raised his revolver. Who's there? A figure emerged from the darkness. A woman. In a cloak. Her face, half-shadowed. Don't shoot, she said quietly. The voice, familiar. Hoarse, like on that film. He froze. That's impossible. She smiled at the corner of her lips. Anything is possible, if you have the right passport. She came closer. Now he could see her face. It was there. The woman from Isdal. Alive. You died. Yes, I heard. It's nice when people care about me. He exhaled. Who are you really? I'm nobody, she replied. I was everything I needed to be. An agent. I don't like concepts. Today an agent, tomorrow a traitor, the day after tomorrow a corpse. It all depends on the report. She passed by as if she were an old acquaintance. You weren't invited here. I'm looking for answers. And I'm the way out. He grinned. So you really were spying? I was watching. Those who built rockets and called it peace. Did they kill you to keep you quiet? No. I burned to make you ask questions. He didn't understand, was it a threat or a philosophy? She looked at him and said, you know, investigator, the truth is like radiation. At first, it seems like everything is under control. And then you start to glow from within. What happened on EDDA-17, he asked. A test. Not missiles. People. What kind of people? The kind who believe orders. She took a step closer. Go away. You still have a chance. After everything. After Joachim, after all this ashes. Joachim knew. He chose to stay. He lowered the gun. Do you regret it? I only regret that I didn't manage to disappear before you started looking. She pulled a small metal capsule from her pocket. It's everything you want to know. And if I open it, then you'll stop being an observer. And what will I become? History. She placed the capsule in his hand and walked away. Tell them I died again. Let them write a nice report. And she was gone. Simply vanished into the snowy shroud. Erland stood alone, the capsule in his palm. The world around him seemed too quiet. Too scorched. He looked at the sky and said. And yet, even the dead have a right to a final secret. Meanwhile, on the other bank, a man in a gray suit reported into his phone. Contact made. He has the materials. Pause. No, there's no need to eliminate him. Why? He won't come back. As Erland's boat sailed away from the island, a fire lit on the horizon. Edda's island flared up like a match. He watched in silence. The flames were reflected in the water, like a multitude of small suns, sinking one after another. He grinned and whispered. Well, Miss Nobody, now you're definitely burned. Ashes ask no questions. But in his pocket, under his coat, the capsule was still there. Warm. As if alive. Chapter 11. Final report. Oslo greeted him with coldness and indifference. As if the entire city were part of a system that knew everything, and preferred to remain silent. Erland walked along the embankment, warming his hands in his pockets. The capsule was still there. A small metal secret, weighing the weight of a lifetime. He hadn't slept for 2 days. Coffee had become his blood, and cigarettes his prayer. The dorm room smelled of damp and paper. He closed the door, lowered the blinds, and turned on the desk lamp. The light was dim, yellow, like a last hope. Before him was the capsule. Engraved on it were the words, "Edda." He stared at it for a long time, as if it were a living being. And he whispered, "What have you hidden, you damn fjord witch?" He opened the capsule with a knife. Click. The metal gave way. Inside was a tiny package of oiled paper and microfilm. He took out a magnifying glass. On the package was a date and signature. November 30th, 1970. Project closed. Material returned to the EDDA archive. He inserted the microfilm into the projector. Click. An image appeared on the wall. First, diagrams. Then, faces. Military personnel, politicians, engineers. And her. A woman from Isdal. In uniform, with a badge that read, Behavioral Response Monitoring. Observation Team B. He rewound. Scenes, people in rooms. Cameras. Electrodes. Psychic test recordings. Voiceover. Subject 23 is reacting to stress in an unusual way. Repeat stimulation. Do not stop until motor changes appear. Erland clenched his teeth. This isn't research. This is training. And suddenly, an image. Her. The woman from Isdal. Standing at the control panel, speaking in German. Empathy interferes with control. It must be turned off first. He turned off the projector. Silence. Only the ticking of a clock. Somewhere behind the wall, someone laughed. Too lively. Too inappropriate. He whispered. So you're not a victim. You're a creator. The next morning, Erland showed up at the department. He threw a folder with printed images on the table. Here. Here are your secret files. The captain looked up. Where did this come from? From the other world, he replied. He flipped through the pages, frowning. This can't be shown. Why? Because you want the world to believe we experimented on people for political balance. And didn't we? No. Officially, no. Erland laughed. Loudly. Dirty. Officially, we don't even have dead people. They're just transferred to the archives. The captain looked at him with pity. You've come too close. There's no turning back now. That's how it should be, Erland said, standing up. If the truth doesn't break bones, it's not true. There was a knock on his room that night. 2 men in suits. No introduction, no words. Erland Nielsen. Are you checking for the last time? Come with us. The black car smelled of leather and bleach. He was silent. He knew the game was over. The ride was long. Then a staircase down. Metal. The echo of footsteps. They led him into a room. A man in gray sat at a table. The same one. Did you find what you were looking for? He asked. I did. And what did you realize? That your ghosts are more alive than the living. He nodded. It's sad when idealists start thinking. And you? When did you stop? The men smiled. When I realized that thinking isn't profitable. What happens next? Erland asked. Nothing. It's fair. We're not talking about fairness. We're talking about order. A pause. The men pulled a familiar capsule from the drawer. We're taking this. It's already open. Too bad for you. 2 days later, a short article appeared in the newspapers. Former investigator Erland Nielsen found dead in his apartment. Preliminary reports indicate suicide. No investigation required. 5 lines. No photo. No context. No meaning. And somewhere on the other side of the country, at the foot of Mount Isdal, a woman in a gray coat stood in the wind. She looked out at the fjord. Her face, calm, ageless. She took out a cigarette, lit it, and said aloud. Nielsen was stubborn. But stubbornness is no antivirus. The flame of the fire briefly illuminated her eyes. They reflected something that cannot die, a secret. She exhaled smoke, smiled, and added. And the funniest thing is, he finally understood. A pause. But it's too late. The story of the Isdal Woman remains unsolved. Every year, someone retells it anew, with new details, new conjectures. But each time, the ending is the same. Whoever seeks the truth finds silence. And in the archives, marked secret, lies a microfilm marked EDDA-17. Acceptance completed. And someone, somewhere, is still watching. Only now, not the objects, but those who ask questions. Truth is not light. It is a fire. And he who lights it is always the first to burn.